You want a gold? We can make the call right now, and it's done with the president of Miners Association right this minute.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'll do three things. The first thing is I will explain why we have a lawyer addressing the press conference and not the client. That's the first thing I will explain. Then secondly, I will explain certain facts that my client wants to put across to the public and the world. Then thirdly, I will give my client his reaction to what comes out of the documentary, the 4 episodes in the Al Jazeera process. So those three things. First, it is permitted by the law of any country that a person can act through their lawyer. It's a very established process. Lawyers are trained exactly for that purpose. They act on behalf of people, and they don't only act in the courts of law, they act in and outside the courts. So it is perfectly permitted by established systems around the world that a person can send their lawyer to say what they would want to say. When the lawyer is coming and saying these things, the lawyer is merely speaking on behalf of their client. We are not defending each other here. I'm just here to say what my client is saying. That's number one. Then I come to number two. There are certain facts that my client wants to be put across very clearly to the world, and then these are the things that will explain whatever we will explain. First and foremost, my client was appointed by the President of Zimbabwe as his ambassador at large. He is very humbled by that appointment, and he has committed himself to executing his duties in that office to the best of his ability, honestly, sincerely, and in the interests of the country. Number two, my client wants it to be put right across on record that he has never, ever done anything on behalf of the president, no deals on behalf of the president, no activities on behalf of the president. His relationship with the president of Zimbabwe, His Excellency E.D. Mnangagwa, is one of principle and urgent, one of superior and subordinate, and he has that relationship. Thirdly, in that regard, my client wants to make it very clear that he has no relationship whatsoever with members of the president, his family. He only has a relationship with the president, which is a formal, professional relationship. He wants me to tell you that he has never met with the First Lady. He actually has never met the First Lady of Zimbabwe because his relationship is with the president. That must be clear. Then I want to read a passage here from my notes with my client, which we would want the whole world to understand. My client, who is Ambassador Eubert Angel, wants it known that he has not been, has never been, and will never be involved in any criminal activity whatsoever. More particularly, he would like it to be stated that he has not been involved in any form of gold dealing or gold smuggling, nor has he ever engaged in money laundering by whatever name it may be called. So the insinuations in the Al Jazeera documentary are wholly baseless. He also wants it known that in his work, immediately after his appointment, he went to do some work, and that work is within the first 6 months of his work is when these issues that have come in the Al Jazeera documentary came about. Now I want to go to that aspect, but this general aspect about the statement I have made, he has never been involved in any. He holds a diplomatic passport, yes, but at the same time he has a British passport. In all his work, he has used his British passport. So he travels around the world as an ordinary holder of a British passport. It is only in 3 instances where he has used his diplomatic passport to travel to 3 countries in Africa that include Zambia and Kenya. Those are the instances where he has done so. But otherwise, he is not carrying himself around the world as a diplomat. He uses that British passport. So he's not. Then he has also declined to receive any payment from the Zimbabwean government. So he's not on a Zimbabwean pay. He is working for the interests of the country. We wish that to be right at the outset. Now we come to the third aspect, which is his involvement in the issues that have come out of the Al Jazeera process. Now I want that to be clear. I will not be handing out the statements I'm reading from. These are just notes. So you have to rely on what we are saying. The position is this. As soon as my client was appointed, it was made known to the whole world that he would be the president's ambassador at large. There were several people in Europe and other parts of the world that wanted to do investment in the country with his facilitation. That is a fact. And then among those persons were people that were genuine and those that were not genuine. But he has facilitated these investment opportunities. Sometime in 2021, when the president was attending COP26 in Scotland, there were a group of persons who now appear and feature in the Al Jazeera documentary, who approached the persons working with my client. My client has an office as an ambassador at large, so he has a team of people, a few people that are his assistants. So through one of his assistants, these people approached my client wanting to see the president and have an investment discussions with the president of Zimbabwe. These people were already in London, and the president was attending COP26 in Scotland. When my client was approached by one of his teammates, he made the usual checks with his subordinate to find out how much they knew of these people. He was advised by one of the person involved that they had been in touch with them for a period in excess of 2 years or whatever. They knew them very well. On that basis, my client then thought he could facilitate an interaction between those persons and the president. The rule of practice is that they were going to check what are called security checks. Who are they and so on. And these security checks had to be undertaken through the national intelligence framework of this country. So the intelligence framework of our country went on to check. The intelligence advised my client that they had serious doubts about the persons, they had serious suspicions about the persons, and that it was not advisable right at that stage for those persons to meet the president. In fact, national intelligence discovered that those persons intended something very dangerous, not just to the country but to the president, that their aim was at the president and whatever. So the position which was discussed, this interaction then led to what we are calling a classified national intelligence assignment, which meant that a decision was taken with the intelligence authorities that my client would play along. He would not cancel his interactions with these persons. He would meet them and meet them as if he was going to make arrangements for them to meet the president and for them to be able to do investments in Zimbabwe. So it was in the context of a national intelligence operation. Zimbabwe wanted to gain intelligence out of it, wanted to see how far its enemies could go and what their agendas were. And these were issues to do with that. That is the context. Now, I should emphasize at this stage that even as I'll give you a few more details in respect of that, so that I explain what my client is saying in respect of what is coming out of the documentary, that ordinarily these things are not told to the world. These things are not told to the public. But because of the intensity of the Al Jazeera documentary and its implications on the integrity of the operations of governmental systems in this country, my client felt obliged that he has a moral obligation at least to give an indication of what was going on. So in terms of then playing along, we want to stress that my client says even as they were going to play along, there was also somewhat a possibility that these persons were not what the intelligence thought they were. So you would find that in some respects, there would have been some element of doubt at some interactions as to, are these people what we think they are and we are playing along, or they are genuine? So there will be actions by my client in the documentary which might not be consistent with the explanation that he was playing along and acting along. This is the point that we wish to make. There was some element of doubt in some respects, but largely and almost mainly, the actions in the documentary are consistent with a classified national intelligence operation which was meant to see how far they would go. Now, what then happens? So in that documentary, all the things that are said, no one was phoned. I'll give that as an example. So there was no call to the First Lady, for example. There was no call to Henrietta Lushwaya. These were decoys that were put in an intelligence operation. So even the statements that you hear, they are not real. That's the explanation coming from my client. If you were to put it very boldly or mildly, boldly but in a mild way, they were acting along. It's unfortunate that, according to the version we are putting, it's unfortunate that it is national security issues that are then played in the public because of the agenda of these people, which agenda then forces issues that ordinarily would not be put on the table to be put on the table. So I have been sent to make that clear that what you see in the documentary is merely playing along. There was never a time, never, according to my client, where people were requested to pay money to see the president. That is false. It would have been part and parcel of a process. There was never a time when the First Lady was called to be able to say that they'll fly jets and so forth to carry gold, or any time that Henrietta Lushwaya was phoned. Every part of the process you see, it is part of that aspect which comes in. If there are a few instances that are not directly consistent with that, I've watched them, I've discussed them with my client to get an explanation as to what would say. It could simply be the manner in which the acting along was done. Now, I then want to conclude and say that I will read this portion of what is coming out. As part of a nefarious agenda to undermine the economic interests of Zimbabwe, including particularly putting the president in the light that is portrayed in the documentary, these persons sought to use Ambassador Eubert Angel as a basis to then carry out that agenda. And the National Intelligence Framework decided that they will play along to see how far it would go. They've already done that, and sufficient information has been obtained as a result of that exercise. And this belongs to the wealth of information that the National Intelligence Framework here has. I have not been asked to get into the details, but I've been given the authority to answer questions that you might want to ask in relation to issues coming out of the documentary. But the final word that ought to be repeated is that what you see is not real. What you see is real acting, going along as part of a classified intelligence framework. People ought to realize that these are things that are difficult to understand because you don't live in the world of how national intelligence operations work and how and the only persons that can really seriously contradict that, anyone who operates in that world would understand what we are saying and would understand the difficulties that we have if we have to say it out. Ordinarily, we would have ignored that and leave it to the processes that are there. So I think I should make that very clear and make that clear as well. He has never worked for the president. There are no deals that are done between the ambassador and the president or the president's family. The president's family was never involved at any stage, and all the things associated with that coming out of the documentary are really acting alone. I would say that I couldn't get an Ndebele expression for it, and you're going to forgive me for that. But in Shona, there is a saying that Wanyangiraya ona, right? So this is what would explain. So Wanyangiraya ona, ukanyangiraya ona, inenge ichingokona ichingotaridza kunge haisi kukona iwo uchifunga kuti hausi kuoneka. But this is the version that is coming from my client, which we thought we should put across to the public. He is totally doing his work to the best of his ability. He is not involved in any corrupt activity of any sort, and he has never dealt with the movement of gold in any way, whether the formal or informal movement of gold. All what you see in the documentary in relation to him is playing along, and that all the conversations, I think I also listened to some of them. The voices that you hear there, clearly if you know the persons involved, they will not be their voices. That is all. I should thank you very much for the framework that we have put across. All right, I am the one who is to say, so I start here.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm Chahodzo Nikadzino. You said whatever that your client was doing, or what was portrayed of him doing in that document, that was part of the national classified intelligence operative, right? So my question is the prophet working for the intelligence now, and is he also speaking on behalf of the intelligence agency? Because I'm sure if this involved the intelligence as an entity which stands alone on itself, it would have ought to respond.
Thank you very much for that question. I think the question is very good in the sense that it gives me an opportunity to say the intelligence never addresses the media. The intelligence never says what's happening. The only reason why we have to address the media and we have to somewhat disclose is because of the very awkward situation that we are placed in, where someone goes with 3-4 episodes of something that ought not have come up. That was a failed attempt in that documentary. And the failure, those persons, they were found out, they were outsmarted, but then they now want to go on a full throttle. So we have to just come out, because if we don't say what we are saying, my client feels very strongly that people would think he is a gold smuggler, he is a corrupt person, and that between him and the first family or the president, there are dirty things happening, and there's nothing like that. So he is both exonerating the first family, everything that, because if you look at especially the last one that we were watching today, it's all about the president and his family, and all about linking. That was the initial agenda which made my client to then ensure that those people would not see the president. And so if the national intelligence people don't speak out, they don't speak out on these issues. And this, we're not sure how they will react to the fact that my client felt he has to come out and say these things.
So it's just a follow-up. The reason why I ask this question is for us to be, because I'm very much aware that the intelligence doesn't address the media, but here your client is disclosing to us that no, there was actually an operation. So can we say he's speaking on behalf of the intelligence?
He's not
disclosing this information to us, and we didn't know that there was an operation in play.
Well, he's not speaking on behalf of the intelligence. He's speaking on his own behalf to show to the world that he is not corrupt. He is not a gold smuggler. He is not involved in all the money laundering things that are coming out. But that he had to do that because the threat to the national security interests came out of his work. They wanted to use him. He had been appointed. And remember, these things took place, like I said, he had been appointed, I think, 6-7 months into, because the COP26 was in about October, November 2021. He had just been appointed 6-7 months into his appointment. And also, I think the other factor I didn't put across was that all the episodes from episode 1 up to episode 4, they took place over just 2 meetings over 2 days in the UK. And this is quite critical. The impression created by the episodes is a long, winding interaction by people that are... There are other players in the documentary. I'm speaking on behalf of my client. So he's not coming here to say that necessity demands that he has to disclose, whether it's allowed to or not. But surely if he doesn't say so, you will think that Ambassador Eubert Angel is some gold smuggler or someone. He has never done that in his life. That's what he has asked me to let the world know. Yes.
Thank you very much.
So I'll come to it.
My name is Dyson Mondo. You say that this whole strategy, what Ambassador Eubert Angel said was part of a national security strategy. But then last week, the RBZ froze his bank account, saying they're investigating his involvement in gold and money laundering. Can you please explain a bit the confusion? Because it seems now a bit confusing that he's working with the government as part of a national security strategy, but then the same government is freezing his account and investigating him.
Thank you again for that question. Remember that the RBZ is not part of the national intelligence frame. So we would not be able to answer for it. I'm sure that, yes, but there are so many things that will happen. I think that is not just, we have said that there are things acting alone, but I think in the process they could discover other things not related to my client. But those measures were taken by the RBZ, and we are not responsible for them. It would have been a different story if you had said to me that the national intelligence framework of the country has gone after my client when he's giving this explanation. This explanation can only be disowned by the national intelligence framework, which says, well, that is not the case. But we are here. I mean, if you look through the documentary according to his version, which I've just put across, there are so many things that don't add up as well. And that the sheer belief, I will give an example of what was it today's episode, where and no one would believe that the president owns some property in Vic Falls or whatever. But when it is coming out, it's part of playing. You are trying to see how far they were going, and they were found where they were going. And the country is better off, intelligence-wise, after what you have seen in the documentary. That's what I can say. Yes.
Thank you very much, Prof. I've got 3 questions for you. I'm going to call my name. Number 1, at what stage you said that there were 2 days meetings which happened? At what stage they noticed that these guys are not genuine? And then you choreograph everything to the extent that they could be able to imitate the voice of Ushuaia within that 2 days. And it happens probably on the first day, looking at the dressing. Because the call that call wearing a suit, which is different from the call you make to the first lady. If you're going to look at it very carefully. Number 2, which part of intelligence was he working for? MIT, CIO, FIU. I believe all these form part of the intelligence unit in this country. And FIU is not part of RBZ, just for your information. It's an intelligence on its own, which also probes the RBZ. Which one was he working for? Was he working for the CIO or the FIU or the MIT? Then, if one was to tell you that Ushuaia is confirmed that he received the call, how will your client respond? Or that Scott has confirmed that he received a call from your client, how will your client respond? Will he still maintain that it was a choreographed act, or you will change his stance? I ask this, I will use the word may, or would have confirmed, to avoid a certain scenario. But he's confirmed, some of those have confirmed that those calls. How will your client confirm?
You are done with your questions? Yes. Okay, thank you for your questions very much. There is a distinction that one has to draw. I'm addressing the conference on behalf of my client. There are certain things, obviously, that I cannot check now, like the first question you have posed, which part of the intelligence. I do not know myself the structure of our intelligence framework. My instructions are very clear that it is an intelligence operation. I think that they work together. Which part, how they are structured, and so on. It's not part of what we are putting across. I'm sure those are the follow-up issues you would carry, and you can carry them. For now, my instructions are to say what I've said. This doesn't stop further inquiries, and this doesn't also stop the fact that at some point, perhaps, you could have other people addressing all these issues followed up. You might come across my client yourself at some point. You can ask them those questions. But what has to be going out now is that point. Then if it is part of you have used the choreographed, it's a playing along that was properly. I think the intelligence works very efficiently. And you want it, according to your question, you think that they would want 2 days or 3 days to do whatever they did. I'm sure they might require much less time than that. So we don't know. Yes.
Thank you so much. My name is Panashino Dogas Magufa. I'm a freelance journalist. Now, the first question is, the first statement that was raised by your client, they said at some point he doubted the intelligence that was coming from the security. Is he saying that he doesn't trust, or as a country we are at risk, we are at security risk? And my second question is, there are sentiments out there that he was pressured by the first family to clean them, or to do this press statement.
Okay.
How would you respond?
I think I should respond to both questions. The first one is that you say my client issued his first statement. It is not true that he has issued a statement. His first public response is what I'm giving you. There was a statement that came out which the media and other members of the public attributed to him. But what is true in that statement which came out, which I can confirm is true, is that as they were playing along, certainly my client had moments where he doubted whether these people were real as what had been conceived, that they intended something bad and that we were to relate with them as bad people. There were moments when there was just genuine confusion as to, are they real what we think they are? That did happen. And he has to say this, and he's saying he's a man of God as well, and that you must not forget that that is something that we have said we should come out, and I've actually been instructed to say so, that there would be moments where he doubted whether in fact the intelligence framework was correct in characterizing these people as not. So you'd have few moments. What if they actually intend to invest? What if they actually intend to real come and build and so on? Those moments were coming from time to time. But those 2 days interactions clearly were on the basis of the intelligence framework that I have indicated. And then I can't go into the details like the other question of what. For me, I would not understand. I'm a lawyer. I certainly would not have the expertise to say how intelligence operates. But there's another portion of your question which says that my client has been pressured by the first family. I have not interacted with the first family myself, but I have interacted with my client. It's not a 2-day thing. He did actually consult with me quite some time ago, and from the time that I was consulted, we had to wait for the last episode. He took advice from me that it would be most appropriate for him to go to the public after the last episode. And then during that period, he was very clear that he had never had any interaction with the first family the way it is portrayed. No, had never seen the first lady, and that his only interaction with that was with the president, and that he is in this situation once the intelligence framework said that those people must not meet the president, but get to meet them, play along, and let's see. Remember that the country has to be doing these things, and so I'm not qualified, but I think that is a complicated thing when intelligence gets involved. So there's no pressure from the first family as far as I am concerned, as far as I know. And that if there is anything, there is pressure on the part of my client. He feels morally obliged to come out to the public and say what he said, that he has never, and that the first family was not involved in the manner that the documentary is. The issue is not about my client. If you look at the documentary, it is about the president and his family, and it's clear that there is that political agenda.
Thank you so much. Is he still employed as ambassador?
Yes, very much so. He is still employed in that capacity, very much so. At least up to the last few minutes when I came to the press conference. Yes.
My name is John Kasim, freelance journalist. I just want to find out maybe clarity on the issue of the name dropping that were being done allegedly. As you are saying that this is what your client is saying, did he know ahead of time the nature of questions that were coming for him to then rush to his phone? Because there's a moment that he rushed, someone took these guys aside when they were talking of 1.2 billion, something like that. And the name dropping were being done. Was he aware of the questions ahead of time?
Okay, what you are calling name dropping is what we are explaining on the basis of an intelligence operation. And that I think that if you call it name dropping, you are seeing it as a reality, what's going on there. And that's what we are explaining here, that is not it. All what you see is part of this classified framework. And he was playing his part very well there. When he gets out in fact, I'm taking too many questions, so perhaps I end up saying things that may be out of my instructions. I don't want to be fired, but let me be clear that my client and others were not aware that they were being, when they first had their meeting, the first meeting that they held, these guys claimed that they wanted to take some pictures for purposes of whoever that they were just to say that the meeting was going on. And so for a short time, 2 or 3 minutes, that's when they saw, like the way you are doing here, I would see that there are cameras. And then you pretend that you have taken your cameras away. So the rest of everything that is happening was done clearly because of that nefarious agenda, completely badly by the persons involved. It was cruelty on the part of the persons that they were dealing with. Right. So, which is what was happening. So when you see the movements that keep coming, and those are the movements that have led my client to explain as he is doing. I'm sure one of these days, if you were to be in that kind of situation, where certain things are never supposed to get to the public because they are of an intelligence nature, once they come out, the public, it will take time for the public to appreciate, which is the reason for the documentary. For example, how do you explain the fact that yesterday we announced that there would be a press conference at 2, when they had said they would have their thing at 10, 11, 12. Then they suddenly put it off and we had to cancel our press conference. Then somewhat around the evening, they start putting in 2-minute excerpts. I'm sure you saw that. And then in the morning, unannounced, they then play their 4th episode. You all saw that. That's not part of it's an agenda, which is clear. That's what my client believes, etc. My role, ladies and gentlemen, has been to put across what my client is saying, which I've put across, that it is not for real. It's a classified intelligence framework. That's what he wants to be made clear. He is not paid by government. He has refused to be paid by government. He has not abused his diplomatic passport. As we've said, he's using a British passport. That I can repeat over and over again. He's a business person, as you may know. Apart from his work as a man of God, he's also into business, and that he will not account for the acts of others. But he is very concerned also that even this initial contact with this group, which has led to all these things, he's very concerned about that. So he has issues with clearly how he came to be made in contact with these people in the first place. And then I should also announce that clearly there are some people that have gone overboard in using the documentary to mischaracterize the nature of my client. Certainly there will be legal action taken against those that continue to peddle things that damage his reputation. And I think there's a law of defamation, as you are aware, and that will be taken advantage of. But we first have to do this and say this is what the position is. Oh, there are so many questions. Yes.
My last question. As a man of God and as a prophet, you could not see or prophesy that you were being prophet.
That's outside my instructions. Yes?
Okay, thank you, sir. My name is Fano. I just want to be clear here. So what you're saying is there is no real existence of this documentary, only an act up in the investigation operation. Is that right?
I would not borrow your words. I would not borrow your words. Let me stick to what I've already said. So you're giving me your own interpretation.
No, I just want to understand because closely, that's what you're nearly saying.
Like I've said, that's your interpretation.
There have been no cause made. It was an operation. They played along. That's the story.
They played along. The calls were made as decoys and so forth. And those are the issues that, look, I think we must separate your interpretations of what I've said. You have recorded what I've said. That is what I'm instructed to say. I maintain that. So even when you say, I will just repeat. If you want me to say, does it mean that? I will simply repeat what I've said, which doesn't help us. You are the media. You interpret, and I think you have the freedom to interpret our version as we have put across. But what we thank you for is that we have had an opportunity to say these things. Whether you think it's wise, unwise, plausible or not plausible, I mean, these are the debates that you can carry yourself. But for me, I have come with that message, and this is what I'm delivering, and I'm sure I'm doing well in that regard. All right. Okay, you have not asked a question, yes?
Yes. So, as a man of God, to preserve his reputation, why didn't he give the public a warning that this documentary will be coming?
He was not aware of the documentary coming. He was also not aware of what they were going to do. What he was aware of was that the machinations, the activities of those people had been frustrated. They had been found out and outsmarted. What they were going to do, obviously, we had to wait and see, so that we then deal with the thing after it has been done. So, I mean, I think the persons behind the documentary intended a particular objective. Whether they have achieved it or not, we don't know. They must be in their own world in which either they are celebrating or they are not celebrating, we don't know. But we have no control over what they do. What we have control over is what we are saying now, that indeed there was that approach for my client and his office to facilitate this group seeing the president. Security checks then showed that those people were not intending good things. But it was important for security reasons to actually use that opportunity to get sufficient intelligence information for the interests of Zimbabwe. Then my client, without his choice, got involved in that process. Yes?
You clearly stated that this press conference is actually to, in a way, to clear your client's name, to represent your client's interests, that he was part of a national intelligence operation, right, which was not meant to be in the public domain, and you clearly stated that you want to represent the national intelligence assistance. So my question would be, you are representing the interests of your client, so are you now saying that since his image has been soiled, your client's interests come above the national interests? Yet this was supposed to be a secret mission which was not supposed to be in the public domain.
Well, I think I hear your question. In fact, the answer to that question is what I've said. It is in the national interest that these things now come out. I think that ordinarily intelligence issues don't come out in the public. And then also ordinarily the intelligence people themselves don't say them out. My client is not part of that intelligence framework. But he is saying it, as I've said, morally he feels he has to do it. and that when he's doing it, it's in the interest of the country. It's in the image coming out of the documentary that all our gold is being taken out of the country, and that it is benefiting a few, that the president's family is doing nothing but all gold smuggling, that the president himself is involved. That is clearly false, clearly without foundation, and meant to damage the interests of the country. At the end, we then justify those who put measures against us, sanctions and so forth. So it is in the interest of the country to say this. And as you know, always you balance interests. Things what you do might undermine other interests. But in this case, it's not just about cleansing the image of my client. It's all about the national interest as well. Yes, it's a question.
Yes, my name is Ntenda Mnongo.
Yeah.
If I'm clear enough, when you made your presentation, you said that when your client was doing his investigations, he was assuming if these people were legit or not. So can we say that other things that happened in this documentary are true because your client was assuming if what these people were doing was true or?
Well, I think that it would not be possible at a press conference to go through the documentary and say, this is where my client is in doubt, and this is where he is. What he wants you to know is that he was also operating, even as he was going along and playing this role, that there were moments of doubt as to whether the intelligence itself may have got it wrong to say, well, those people are not for good, they will not see the president, make sure that they will not see the president, but we want to play along with them, we want to see how far they would go. He's not a trained intelligence operative. He is a man of God, he is an ambassador at large, and I think in playing that role, that's my understanding, he would certainly not be...
Was it not dangerous to use a man who is not trained in that operation to do such a huge operation?
He was already in the crossfire. Remember that, yeah, I mean, you must understand, yes, let's understand where it is coming from. He already has these people brought to him by his team. One member of his team says, these people want to meet the president, they are about investment opportunities that they want to discuss. His role, he has been appointed to ensure that we get investment. That was his role. So he's already with these people. It's only when you discover now that you have to do the security checks that you get the information back that says the people which you already are interacting with are not good for the country and they do not intend good things. You see that. So he has to be the one to do it in the circumstances. I think your questions have to come to an end at some point. And so there is someone, I'll come back to you, and then the other hand there, yes. I'm sure you will agree that at some point we have to come to an end. And yes.
Professor, my question is, since you say that the minister was doubting those people, why did he keep on entertaining them? And as far as calling people who he knew were big people, like name dropping. Those people are not from Zimbabwe, and they don't know Rufai, they don't know the first lady. Like, what was the purpose of calling them whilst he was doubting them?
Well, that was consistent with the decoy. It was also consistent with carrying them along because I think if we give details, these persons wanted, all they wanted was ultimately to get at the president and the first family. They had already a pre-package, which is what was discovered by the intelligence, and which is what the documentary, despite all that happened, seeks to still portray. So it's consistent with that framework that has come out. Right. Let's leave these for discussions and interpretations because we have put out the fact, the whys and why not. I think that's part of the debate that will come out. But the version of my client has been put across. I have that hand, and then you said your question was not answered. This sentence.
Thank you. So my question would be, how long has he been your client? Him coming out to speak to the media, is he in breach of his employment contract? And has he spoken with his principal, the president, since the documentary started coming out?
The first question, how long has he been my client, is subject to one of the oldest rules called lawyer-client privilege. So it can't be disclosed. Right? That question, yes. It's not, it cannot be answered. It will be in breach of my my ethical and professional requirements. I should not tell you when. What matters that he is my client. That is correct. Then as to whether that he is in breach. He is not certainly in breach of his. If he is in breach, the president can always take action. He's not in breach. He has to come out to explain what has happened. It's in the interest of the country that my client explains the way we have tried to do. I've left open the fact that whether this is successful or not really is the problem we have come, which has been brought by the Al Jazeera documentary. My client's position is that's totally unfounded, the insinuations coming out of that. You had,
question was, is he spoken with this principle since the documentary appeared?
I'm not instructed on that point, whether they have spoken. My instructions for now are to give out this version as a response to the 4 episodes in the documentary, which is what I've done now. And I think from the look of things,
Going to receive instructions?
As long as he maintains me as lawyer, I think he will give me further instructions. And I should not rule out the fact that we can address other conferences depending on the doubts that I imagine. There was the last question there.
Prof, you have to respond to the question of how your client would respond if other participants or other alleged decoys confirm that indeed they received calls during the time from and having those discussions with your client. How will he respond? Number one. Number two, just to add on that, you indicate that this was an operation by the intelligence. Looking at the opportunity cost, which is better? A country's name damaged internationally. The country's gold is now viewed as being smuggled against intel gathering by the intelligence. From your client perspective, which would be a far-reaching, better option, looking at what has happened now and what was intended, alleged, is true?
Now, my client and others were not in a documentary. They are not part of it. It was not a scheme that will come out. This documentary was never supposed to come out. It's a documentary by those that made it. These people that are participating and getting along, it's not getting along so that it will come out. It's getting along so you get the intelligence. You frustrate what they want to do, but you also get the intelligence of what they intend to do, and that you'll never get such a thing happening, what people would want to do to damage. Then your first question, I think it's answered by the playing along would mean that you call. I mean, there are people that were coming, the voices that were coming out. That means some people were called. But that was not for real. That's what we are meaning. I'm not sure who answered.
I think one of those guys confirmed that the real call happened. You say that the way, you said that Rushoya was never called. You pick a name, Rushoya was never called. How about Rushoya to confirm that indeed I was called by Angel? How will you plan to confirm?
Well, look, I think the point I'm making is that the calls were decoys. As to who answered those calls or not, that's a different question. It's not a real, yeah, that's right. That's the point I'm making. Please, I need to get, yes, last question, I think I've been, yes.